Hello learners, welcome to our session today. I'm your instructor, CPA ARINGO FREDRICK. So in our class today is a continuation of what we've been doing. But this session we are going to introduce a very important concept in our variance analysis, and we normally term them as what? Mixed variances. We normally term them as mixed variances. You normally term them as mixed variances. So looking at this concept of mix, I know most of the students, they normally tend to fear this concept, but you find it to be one of the easiest concepts that you can ever learn in management accounting. So looking at the mixed variance, just as the word suggests, just as this word suggests, I'm talking of what? I'm talking of our mix. Of course, you'll be looking at it in terms of what? In terms of labor and material. Because if you recall, when we introduced variance analysis, there was that concept where we say that usage variance is going to give birth to that is yield and mix. Talk of efficiency. We also mentioned that efficiency is going to give birth to what? Aspect of aspect of a mix and yield. So in our class today, my good students, I want to give you the concept behind a mixed variance, so that at any given point, whenever you've seen this mixed variance, should be one of the easiest concepts. So looking at the mix, this idea of mixed variance, this idea. You are producing product A. You are producing product A. And in producing this product, maybe I require various materials. X, Y, Z, C. These are the materials that will be required to do, or rather to produce our product. So maybe material A, maybe I require say like 10 kgs. Material Y, maybe I require say like 20 kgs. Material Z, maybe I require say like 15 kgs. And material C, maybe I require say like 5 kgs. So what you'll note here is that in production of this product, I'm going to have a component of all these materials, so that this product, I'll say it is as a result of a mixture of all these materials. Maybe this was your budget data. If you are to look at your actual data, maybe it will be different. Assuming that I budgeted for X to be 10, maybe I'm having 15. Maybe I'm having 10. Maybe I'm having say like 25. Maybe I'm having say like 15. In that case, I had budgeted to use this aspect of kgs in our production, but we ended up using this mix. So you as a management accountant, you find that you are going to be engaged in this case, at least to determine the variances that are going to result from whatever that you budgeted and whatever that you are actually using, in terms of what? In terms of the various components that you'll be having. And this is what you're terming it as what? As mix variance. Because the concept behind variance is the difference. The difference between what? The actual and the budgeted. So you'll find that the whole concept of mix, this is what we'll be looking at. This is what we'll be looking at. So after we've mentioned that one, we can introduce this concept so that you have it in mind, so that you have it in mind, so that you have it in mind. So we start with material mix and yield variance. Material mix and yield variances. So looking at material mix variance, first of all, we all mentioned that these ones are going to come from what? Material mix is going to come from usage variance. So basically, we normally say that where a product is composed of more than one ingredient, it might be necessary to determine the material mix and material yield variance. For those who are writing, you can write. We are saying that where a product is composed of more than one ingredient, it might be necessary to determine the material mix and material yield variance. It might be necessary to determine material mix and material yield variance. Then, as I mentioned earlier on, we said that these variances are broken down from material usage variance. They are broken down from material usage variance. And if it is labor, we'll be talking of what? Labor efficiency variance. So we are saying that these are broken down from material usage variance. These are broken down from material usage variance. They are broken down from material usage variance. They are broken down from material usage variance. So ideally, this is what we are talking about. And again, we are saying that yield variance compares. We are saying that we start with the aspect of mix. We start with material mix. We start with the material mix variance. If you're to look at mix variance, you normally say that this variance compares, this variance compares, this variance compares, or this compares, this compares, this standard mix, this compares, the standard mix, this compares the standard mix, and the actual mix, and the actual mix, of material used, just as I had mentioned it earlier on. So you'll find that whenever we'll be talking of material mix variance, we normally say that this compares the standard mix and the actual mix of the material used, Therefore, to determine the mix variance, to determine the material mix variance, you normally say we'll be talking of our standard mix of the total actual input of material. Standard mix of the total actual input of material, or standard mix of the total actual material input. We less what? Our actual mix. All these, they are going to be valued using our standard price. So the main concept here, my good student, what we should understand is that at this point I'll just be looking at the aspect of our standard mix of the total actual input of our material minus our actual mix. I want you to understand the concept of this standard mix. Assuming that you are talking of this, talk of ingredients or talk of the materials. In producing, say, product A, we can just take the same scenario that we had looked at there earlier on. Maybe I require, say, talk of X, Y, Z. You can just also talk of the three products only. In this case, maybe I require, say, like 30 kgs of X, 50 kgs of Z, and 15 kgs of Z. 50 kgs of Y and 15 kgs of Z. I want you to understand this concept clearly. I want to understand this concept very well. So in our production, as we've said, this is what I was budgeted. This is our standard. That is what we had budgeted. That is what you had budgeted, right? So looking at this case, my good students, we are seeing that in producing, say, like this product of ours had budgeted to use 30 kgs of X, 50 kgs of Y, 15 kgs of Z. Whenever we're talking of the standard mix, I'm talking of the proportion. So we need to determine the proportion of each component to our final product. Assuming that in this case, your actual, assuming in this case that our actual, for X, Y, and Z, assuming our actual for X, Y, and Z, maybe I'm talking of say like 20,000 kgs. Y, maybe I'm talking of say like 15,000 kgs, and this other maybe I'm talking of say like talk of maybe 25,000 kgs. So this is the area that you should mark it very clearly. This is the area that I want you guys to understand very well. Standard. At budgeted in producing material A, at budgeted to use 30 kgs of X, 50 kgs of Y, and 15 kgs of Z. So I need to determine the proportion of each component to our final product. Can we determine that proportion? Yes, you can determine that proportion. First of all, I'm going to sum here, right? And in summing it up, I should be having 80, I should be talking of 95 kgs. To determine the proportion of X, I should be talking of what? 30 of 95, right? To determine the proportion of Y that I used, I should be talking of 50 of 95. And talk of Z, I should be talking of 15 of 95. That is our proportion. These are the proportion that we are using. These are the proportion that we are using. And I want you to pay very keen attention on this concept, because the moment you've grasped it right, you'll find that going forward it will be very easy for us. The moment you've grasped it right, going forward it will be very easy for us. So I've determined our proportion. This proportion are what we're terming them as what? As our standard mix. It is these proportions that we're terming them as our standard mix of the total actual input of the material. Of the total actual input of our material. Our total actual input, the actual kgs, the actual input that we had. These are our actual. And the total should give us a figure of 25 plus 15 plus 20 to give us 60 kgs. 60,000 kgs. So these are our total input. So what we are saying, standard mix of the total actual input of material, I should multiply that with our total input, which in this case I'm having 60,000 kgs. Which in this case I'm having 60,000 kgs. That is our total input. So whichever figure I'm going to get here, whichever figure that we are going to get there, that is what will give us our standard mix of the total actual input of materials. Of the total standard mix of the total actual input of the material. So the main thing that you should understand here, that for us to determine this, first of all, I need to determine our input, total input. Then I need to look at the standard mix. This is proportion. How much or how many kgs, how many liters or how many grams have you budgeted to use to produce one unit? Taking the proportion of each component. You multiply that by your actual input, total. The moment you have that, it will be very simple for you. Because say like for example, if here for example I'm having say like just an assumption, maybe I have say like 35,000 kgs. This is what I'm going to term it as what? The standard mix of the total actual input. This is what I'm going to term it as the standard mix of the total actual input. Minus our actual mix. Minus our actual mix. how will we achieve this actual mix? The actual mix are exactly what you are using. Are the materials that you are using, total materials that you are using, exact materials. For example, like in product X, our mix, we can say it is 20,000 kgs because that is what I had budgeted to use, right? That is what you had budgeted, or rather that is what I'm actually using, not even budgeted. That is what I'm actually using. So that is what I'm going to term it as what? As our actual mix. That's what I'm going to term it as our actual mix. Meaning that at this point I'll be talking of minus 20,000 kgs. That is the actual mix. That's the actual mix. Of course, you go ahead and multiply it by what? By our standard price. So the key concept whenever you're dealing with mixed variances is here. Understanding how to determine the standard mix or the total actual input of material. The moment you are able to grasp that one, it will be very easy for you to handle any question when it comes to mixed variance. So kindly, I want you to go through, if possible, repeat this video every now and then till you grasp this concept. And in the event that you do have a question, my good students, in the event that you feel that you're not probably understanding the concept well, you can always engage us, you can always ask questions, and we'll be here to assist you. We'll be here to assist you. So after we've talked of our mixed variance, and also want us to talk of our yield variance. Talk of material yield variance. Material yield variance. I want us to talk of material yield variance. So in yield variance, my good students, this will be very simple because in this case we'll be talking of what? We normally say that yield variance compares. This one compares the standard quantity. This compares the standard quantity and the standard mix. So you are saying that this one compares the standard quantity and the standard mix. This one compares the standard quantity and the standard mix. Meaning that for us to determine our material yield variance, we will be talking of standard quantity minus our standard mix. Minus our standard mix. We multiply by our standard price. We multiply by our standard price. And the standard mix that you're talking about is this one here. That's why I was saying, if you are able to determine your mix variance, this one will be very simple for us. This one will be very, very simple for us. This one will be very, very simple for us. So ideally, this is what we are terming it as what? As material mix and material yield variance. Material mix and material yield variance. The moment you grasp that one, you'll find that if we'll be looking at labor mix and labor yield variance, it will be very simple for us to understand now. Labor mix and labor yield variance. This one now will be very, very simple for us to get it well. Labor mix variance and labor yield variance, it will be very simple now for us to understand it. Because whenever we'll be talking of a labor mix variance, whenever we'll be talking of labor mix variance, same concept applies with what you've seen in material. We normally say that this one compares. It compares the standard mix. It compares the standard mix and the actual total labor hours worked. Mark it well. We are saying that it compares the standard mix and the actual. It compares the standard mix and the actual mix. This is the actual mix, sorry. This is the actual mix of the total actual mix of the total labor hours worked. Labor hours worked. We are saying that this one compares the standard mix and the actual mix of the total labor hours. Keyword here is labor hours worked. Labor hours worked. Keyword is labor hours worked. Is labor hours worked. So the same concept here, you'll find that to determine our labor mix variance, this is what we'll be looking at. Labor mix variance. And be talking of our standard mix. Standard mix of the total actual hours worked minus what? Minus our actual mix. Minus our actual mix. Minus our actual mix. Of course, we are going to multiply this by our standard rate. We are going to multiply that by our standard rate. So the same concept applies. The way we had looked at that explanation of the standard mix or for the total actual hours worked, or for the total actual materials used, you'll find that is the same case here for labor. Why am I saying that is the same? Take for example this case, the same scenario here, the same scenario here. But this time round, remember, we are not using what? We are not using aspect of materials. In this case, we are talking of what? We are talking of hours. We are talking of hours. We are talking of hours. So, looking at that case, this will give us hours, right? Hours. Hours. This will give us hours. Hours and talk of hours. Hours. Understanding the same concept clearly, you'll find that in this case, I'll be looking at the standard hours that I'm budgeted to use in producing 1 unit. In producing 1 unit. In producing 1 unit, how many hours are you budgeted to use? How many hours are you budgeted to use in producing 1 unit? So this is what we have. 30. Right? 30 of what? X. 50 of what? Of Y. And 15 of Z. 15 of Z. These are hours. These are hours that we are talking about. These are hours that we are talking about. So, the moment you do have that case, this is what we'll be having. I'm going to determine the proportion of the hours that I had budgeted. I'm going to talk of the proportion of the hours that we had budgeted, assuming that this is a skill, this is semi-skilled, and this is unskilled laborers. So for skilled labor, I'd budgeted to use 30 hours in producing 1 unit. For semi-skilled, I'd budgeted to use 50 hours in producing 1 unit. For unskilled, I'd budgeted to use 15 hours. So I'll have to determine the proportion of that to what? To our total hours here, which in this case, this is our total hours summation of the actual hours that you are working. The actual hours that you are working. So that should give us our total hours. So in labor mix variance, same concept. We less our actual mix. So that in this case, we'll find that whatever figure that I'll be having here, I'm going to deduct, say if it's for say like a scale, I'm going to deduct with the actual hours. With the actual hours. So the main concept behind labor mix is just the same concept as with material mix variance. As with material mix variance. As with material mix variance. Now, after we talked of that, talk of what? Labor yield variance. Talk of labor yield variance. What is labor yield variance, my good students? Labor yield variance, you normally say that this one compares the standard hours. This one compares the standard hours. This one compares the standard hours. And our standard mix and our standard mix. The same mix that you are talking about here, the same mix that you're talking about here, the same mix that you're talking about here, that is a standard mix. This is a mix that you're talking about, still on the same. Meaning that, to determine our labor yield variance, if you can allow me to erase here. So this is what we'll be having in our labor yield variance. Labor yield variance, I'll be talking of labor yield variance, I'll be talking of our standard hours minus the standard mix. We multiply that with our standard rate. We multiply that on by a standard rate. As simple as that, my good students. As simple as that. Talk of labor yield variance, I should be having it in this case. I should be having it in that case. So after we've talked of the mix and yield variance, to understand the concept very well, I want us to handle an illustration question. And this illustration question, you're going to handle it in our next class, so that it will assist you to understand this concept very clearly. It will assist you to understand these concepts very clearly. So kindly join me in the next session where we are going to handle an illustration question. Thank you so much, and you have a nice time. Thank you.